All right, chapter 21. This is the final chapter. Ooh, and then we're done. Now it's a matter of, after this, studying your booties off to pass that exam. All right, so chapter 21, public records, titles, and closings. In this chapter, you can explain New Jersey recording acts that establish chain of title. We're going to learn about evidence of title and marketable or merchantable title. We're going to learn some of that terms as well. We're going to summarize the components of the closing process and how it works. And we're going to learn the math of prorations. That'll be like the last math problem that we do. All right, so the Public Recording Act allows, it's a law in New Jersey that allows any interested parties in a parcel of real estate to attach documents in the public records related to the ownership of that land, like a mortgage loan, or if somebody did not pay a contractor for work they did, they could put a lien on the property and record it in the public records. So now if they're trying to sell the property, anyone can do a search of the public records and they can see that someone else has put a lien on it. They're showing they have an interest in the property. So it's filed in the public records and it gives legal, public, and constructive notice. Ooh, terms we're going to learn about constructive notice to the world of our interest in the property. And the county clerk is generally the recorder of these documents in the public record. However, there is a separate registrar of deeds in Camden, Essex, Hudson, Passaic, and Union counties because that's all they do. Now, the state legislatures pass laws that allow owners or parties interested in real estate to record or file in the public records all documents affecting their interest in real estate to give legal, public, and constructive notice to the world of their interest. So there you go. That's the bottom of page 381, the first page of chapter 21. Okay, so why the necessity for recording? Well, recording documents in the public record establishes the priorities for those liens. So pertaining to liens anyway, it establishes the lien repayment order. Uh, the lien repayment order is determined according to the priority. And what determines the priority? Well, the date of recording in the public records. So in the event of foreclosure, who gets paid first from the proceeds of that sale? Well, they get paid according to their priority of the recording of their lien in the order that they record it, with the exception of two things. You remember what they are? Taxes, death and taxes, right? Taxes go to the head of the line. They jump the head of the line all the time. They need to be paid first. And a mechanic's lien. That's a contractor's lien. Contractor did work, they didn't get paid. Their lien is retroactively backdated. It doesn't matter when they record it, it's retroactively backdated to the date the materials were delivered or the work began, whichever occurred first. So property taxes jump ahead of everything. Oh, I already have that written here. Look at that. Okay, so I don't got to read it now. Now, recording a document is when a written notice is added to the county records of the land ownership where the land is located. Any documents must be acknowledged before they can be recorded. So what is acknowledgement? To be eligible for recording, an instrument must be acknowledged, notarized, and proved to be authentic before an authorized official. Okay. So you get these people on commercials all the time now. Buy our insurance for title fraud, deed fraud. Yeah, you guys ever see those commercials? They're constantly on TV. You know, the title fraud where somebody can steal your house just by having a notary stamp a document and forged document and put it in a public record that they changed the ownership into your name now. No, it's not that easy. It needs to be the document needs to be acknowledged by the notary, but it also they send out notifications to the property owners too. Unless they're stealing your mail as well, it's not going to happen. Caveat emptor means let the buyer beware. So it's your responsibility to perform any inspections and do your own due diligence on a property before buying it. That includes a search of the public records to see if there's any liens or encumbrances on the property. Not just having an inspector inspect the physical structures, but also we have surveyors. They do a survey of the land. We have somebody who does a title search, a search of the public records. These are all forms of home inspections of sorts. Here's another one, constructive notice. What is constructive notice? It means the information is publicly available because it's been recorded in the public records. Courts assume interested parties did their research and search the public records because this information's there. It's publicly available. All you got to do is bother to look and check. So courts assume that interested parties did that research and therefore assumes they have knowledge of any information that's available in the public records. There's no excuse. Well, I didn't know. I didn't look at the public records. Well, why you should have. You're buying a property. It's your responsibility to do your own research. Caveat emptor, right? Let the buyer beware. You want to find out if there's any issues with the property? Look. That's all they're saying. The information was there. It was disclosed. It's available publicly. Look. Now, so courts assume you have that knowledge and you did look, whether you did or not. That's what constructive notice means. It differs from actual notice. Actual notice is anything you have direct knowledge of. So now if you actually search the public records, you do have direct knowledge of that information that you've learned. So now you have actual notice. You see the difference between constructive notice and actual notice? Actual notice is anything you have direct knowledge of. All right. Constructive notice just means that something's available in the public record and you could have found out if you bothered to look. But courts do assume that you did look so that you do have that knowledge. All right, so long-term leases, 2 or more years, they can be added to the public records as well. Okay, let's just do the highlights here. Caveat emptor, no, it's caveat emptor. And constructive notice, or what the buyer could find out, is distinguished from actual notice, or what the person actually knows. It's anything they have direct knowledge of. So I wrote above actual notice, direct knowledge. And where it says constructive notice, or what the buyer could find out, I put a little arrow to it here and a note that says, because it's recorded in the public record. Okay. Okay, everybody got that? Okay, so actual notice is any information the person has direct knowledge about. So once you search the public records, you do have actual notice. Actual notice is any information which he or she has direct knowledge. So it's the duty of the purchaser to do their research, to do their own due diligence. Chain of title shows the record of ownership of the property over a period of time. It links one owner to the next using the documents that are recorded in the public records. So if you search the public records and you could trace back one owner linking one owner to the next, well, linking, there's many links in a chain. So each owner is a link in that chain. So if you could link their documents of ownership from one owner to the next, this is called now a chain of title. That's how you create the chain. Each owner is a link in that chain. And if you could link one owner to the next, you now have a chain of title. However, if you cannot link one owner directly to the next, it's known as being a gap or a break in the chain. Make sense? So a gap or break in the chain of title could also indicate a problem. Why is there no link from one owner to the next? Was there an improper transfer of ownership? Or was it someone who just simply did not record their ownership in the public record because, well, you're not required to by law? It's in everybody's best interest you do, but you're not required to. Either way, for a potential buyer, that creates a cloud on the title until we figure out what happened, because that's a potential problem, right? Right. So, gaps like these can be bridged or cured with a quitclaim deed or a suit to quiet title, where a judge will see the evidence of how you became a owner and who was linked to who, even though it was not recorded in a public record. And then a judge will render whether you got good, clear title or not, to quiet the rumblings of any other third parties pertaining to the title, the ownership. Title means ownership. So let's do these highlights on page 383. Chain of title shows the record of ownership transfers for the property over a period of time. An abstract of title is a condensed history of all instruments affecting a particular parcel of land. So basically, someone known as an abstractor goes down and searches the public records, and they make a list in chronological order according to the date that documents were recorded in the public record. And then they turn that list over to either the insurance company that they work for or an attorney who will then examine that list and render a decision whether you got good, clear title or not. So through the chain of title, the ownership of property can be traced from its origin to the present owner. And if that can't be done, it's said that there's a gap in the chain. And a quitclaim deed is commonly used to bridge such gap. But they could also use a suit to quiet title. Okay. Those are pretty good explanations, actually. All right. Evidence of title. What are the four evidences of title? Because a deed is a document that's used to transfer ownership, to transfer title, but it's not proof of title, proof of evidence of title. So what are the four evidences of title? This is not the first time we've seen this, right? You should probably already have it highlighted, right? So abstract of title with attorney's opinion, a title insurance policy, which is most commonly used here in New Jersey, a Torrens certificate, which is not used in New Jersey at all because we don't have a Torrens system, and a certificate of title. And then here down below, a deed is not proof of title. It's not proof of ownership. So deed is not proof or evidence of title. There is four evidences or proofs of ownership. You got the abstract. So here I just wrote it down on my own slide here where I wrote it. And I gave a little explanation. You have abstract of title with attorney's opinion, certificate of title, which is often oral or implied, title insurance policy, which there's two types, the lender's policy, which would pay off any amount owed, and the buyer's policy, which reimburses the buyer for any amount paid. And then we have the Torrens certificate, which is not used in New Jersey. Okay, so the deed is a document used to transfer one's right, title, or interest in real property, but is not proof of ownership or evidence of title. We have an abstract of title, an attorney's opinion. An abstractor searches the public records, like I explained a little while ago, and they make a list of all documents pertaining to the ownership that could be located in the public records according to their date. Then the information is examined by an attorney who determines if the owner has good title free from any liens or encumbrances or other defects. So title insurance policy, there's two types. The lender's policy, like I said, pays off any amount owed on the mortgage loan, and a buyer's policy, which pay off any amount, which would pay back any amount paid already by the buyer. If their title, their ownership should fail in the future because it comes up that somebody pops up and says that they're the rightful owner of the property and they're able to prove it, you'd have to give up the property to them. So where do you stand with the money that you paid out or money that you owe? Well, title, hopefully you had title insurance. Now, before a title insurance policy is issued, the insurance company has their own abstractor searching the public records, and they search back at least 60 years but they try to go back as far as they can, tracing back all the ownership, that making sure there was no improper transfers in the past, so that nobody's going to be stepping forward and claiming ownership. So here's a little note here. Buyers cannot shop for better prices when purchasing title insurance. The price is established by the state, and it goes according to the value of the property that's being purchased. That's just my little notation for you, a little factoid. Yeah, a factoid. I like that word. So instead of notes, we're going to start changing notes to factoids. There you go, like a factoid. All right. So let's do the highlights now. Not much to highlight here, actually. My notes were better for giving you information. There's no one-liners, really. You'd have to read the whole thing to understand it. So an abstracted title is a brief history of instruments appearing in the county records that affect the title to a parcel in question. And condition of the ownership, this report is called an attorney's opinion of title. You guys are getting all these new phrases, right? The caveat emptor, constructive notice, actual notice, chain of title, abstract of title, the four evidences of title. Those are questions under the category of ownership on the exam. Okay. So title insurance policy. Well, the only thing I highlight here is the title insurance policy. It is what it is. You know, it's insurance. I told you there's two types, one that covers the lender, one that covers the buyer. The one that covers the buyer will insure them if their title should ever fail, and they issue title insurance policy, you know, ensuring the fact that you have good, clear title. Well, if any liens pop up, title insurance would have to pay them. If anybody steps forward and claims that they're the rightful owner, well, title insurance would try to defend it, and if they can't, then they reimburse the buyer for any money they paid out. They reimburse the lender for any balance owed. For an additional charge, owner's title insurance policy to protect their interest, the state of New Jersey regulates the rates that may be charged for title insurance, both original policies and reissues. And then all this other stuff just talks about what I said. You know, if title should fail, the insurance company will reimburse the buyer. And if you had the mortgage for the lender insurance, it would also reimburse the lender for amount outstanding. Okay, so Torrens certificate. We don't use that in New Jersey. We don't have a Torrens system, but what is a Torrens system? Well, anytime a property is sold, the attorney prepares a certificate of title and they search the public records. And then they must register it in a central hall of records, the ownership transfer, and who the owner and buyer is. This is optional in New Jersey. Owners are not required to record their deed in the public records, but if they do, we have 21 different counties, and in each, they maintain the Hall of Records for all the municipalities within that county if somebody wishes to record their interest. So in a Torrens system, they have to. Okay. We don't use Torrens systems in New Jersey, bottom line. All right, a certificate of title is often oral or implied. Okay, it may not even be in writing. Well, who would accept that form of proof of ownership? Well, maybe a lender would. The moment before closing, before they release the authorization of the funds they already wired to the closing agent, uh, they'll get on the phone one last time with them just to confirm that evidence of title has been established, meaning they searched the public records and they know that there's good, clear title that's being transferred and nothing that could risk the lender's collateral, which is the property, if they release these funds, that they're not just going to waste there. So a certificate of title is when an attorney searches the public records and no abstract of title is prepared. The attorney simply gives their opinion if the owner has good, clear title. This is often simply a verbal or oral representation and not put in writing. And if their attorney missed something, you'd have to sue the attorney for satisfaction. And all right, and then remember, this is the slide I put together for you guys. You guys can, I'm sure you snapped a picture of this already a while back, right? That title is just a word that means ownership, and there's no document in real estate called title. A deed is the document used to transfer title, but it's not just used to transfer ownership. Deed is a document used to transfer ownership, but is not proof of ownership. A deed is an instrument used to convey title, but is not evidence of title. That's another way of saying the same thing. Now, a deed is also used to transfer one's rights or interest in real property, like air rights, mineral rights, subsurface rights, or their partial ownership interest. The ownership is transferred upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself, which does not need to be signed or dated by the buyer unless the buyer records the deed in the public records. And then their signature also needs to be acknowledged to prevent forgeries. So recording documents in the public record is adding it to the public records in the County Hall of Records, where all the ownership documents and land records are kept. Why do we record documents in the public record again? To put the world on notice of our interest in the property, recording our new ownership, or attaching a lien on the property, etc. So what are the four evidences of title, the four proofs of ownership? Once again, abstract of title with attorney's opinion, a certificate of title, title insurance policy, and a Torrens certificate. You need to know which one's most often used in New Jersey and which one is not used in New Jersey. Marketable or merchantable title. What is that? Here, we could highlight that here in the book, page 385. Marketable or merchantable title is one that's so free from significant defects other than those the buyer agreed to accept. Marketable means that it's sellable. So who's going to buy a piece of property? Well, people will buy property if it's easily transferable. But the more, can you buy a property that has liens on it or any kinds of other defects on the title? That's encumbered. Here, let me put it another way. Can you buy a property that's encumbered by something?
Depends.
Well, the question was, can you? Can you buy a property that's encumbered
Yes.
by something?
No.
Sure you can. Sure you can. It's just it may be harder to, right? Can you sell a property that's encumbered by something? Sure, it's just harder to. So, but can you buy a property that's encumbered by something? Sure you can. You know, I don't know why you'd want to, unless it depends on how bad it's encumbered, right? What the causes of encumbrances are. So, if it has so many encumbrances on it that it doesn't really, the juice ain't worth the squeeze to go through with the purchase, then it's not marketable or merchantable, right? That's all. That's the point we're trying to get across here. So it's free enough from significant defects like encumbrances and deed restrictions or other liens that the seller has disclosed to the buyer and the buyer is willing to accept. The purchaser can be assured against having to defend the quality of the title. And it's useful to buy title insurance for both the buyer and the lender in in case the quality of title has defects that would cause the new owner to lose the property or have to pay liens off, which get paid in the order to prevent a foreclosure. All right. Closing the transaction. The funds are dispersed in exchange for the deed. There's two parts of the mortgage, the note and the mortgage itself. The mortgage itself is a promise to pay, right? And the note is the financing instrument that lays out all the terms, the interest rate, the amount borrowed, the terms of repayment, the amounts, etc. The mortgage is the pledging of the property as security for the loan without giving up the property because you're living in it, right? Hypothecation. An example of hypothecation is the mortgage. You're pledging the property as security for a loan without giving up the property. Hypothecation is the opposite of what happens in pawn shops, where you actually give up the property, and then after you pay it off, whatever you borrowed, then you go back and get your property. You don't do that with a house, though. You live in the house as you pay it off. And if you stop making payments, they have to come after it to take that property. So hypothecation, that's what happens in hypothecation. Um, and a mortgage loan is an example, a mortgage is an example of hypothecation. The lender would have to come and get it using the process of foreclosure if you violated the terms of your loan. Now, two transactions usually take place at the closing. One is the closing of the sale, where the seller delivers the deed in exchange for the purchase price. The seller delivers the good clear title by deed, and the property is delivered in the same condition as was seen when the buyer made the offer. And the other transaction is the closing of the loan. That's a transaction all into its own, right? The buyer delivers sufficient funds to complete the sale. The buyer signs the lender's documents after providing all their financial and property information, like inspection reports and appraisals. They show evidence of property insurance for the collateralized property, etc. So you may want to take a snap picture of this part of the slide. You know, there's two transactions that actually take place. Actually, knowing about the note and the mortgage is good too. But in the book, we're going to be doing this. Well, we could highlight this. You know, it's in many sales transactions, two closings actually take place: the closing of the buyer's loan and then the closing of the sale, where the deed is delivered in exchange for the purchase price. So you may want to write that there so you don't got to draw all these arrows and have the highlights going back up. You could just highlight or underline this. In many sales transactions, two closings actually take place at this time. One is the closing of the buyer's loan, where the deed is delivered in exchange for the purchase price. Oh, I'm sorry, the closing of the buyer's loan. And the other is the closing of the sale. And then right there, where the deed is delivered in exchange for the purchase price. Either that, or you could highlight it here and then draw the arrow going back up to that. That's usually a question on exam sooner than later. Hint, hint. Just putting it out there. Okay, everybody got that? So the lender has some interest at closing. The buyer obtained the homeowner's insurance. The lender wants to make sure the buyer obtained the homeowner's insurance policy to ensure their collateral for that loan. They want to make sure that the buyer obtained the certificate of occupancy, or the seller did, and the buyer got it, as well as the fire inspections to show that everything's copacetic. They want to make sure, at minimum, there was an inspection for wood destroying insects. Make sure that that collateralized property is not being eaten up and about to collapse because termites just munched on all the wood. And if it's in a flood zone, they want to make sure you have flood insurance. So if it's in a 100-year flood zone, the insurance is required. If it's in a 500-year flood zone, it's optional. So to dispute a flood zone determination, if your lender tells you, hey, your property's in a flood zone, you need to have flood insurance. And you're like, no, it's not. And it's like just on the outskirts. Well, one way to determine this is you got to order a flood determination study or a flood elevation study. You could get this through, you could search to see if it's in a flood zone, but usually the flood determination you'd get from a surveyor that would check elevation of the property. What's a measurement of elevation called?
Dudam.
The datum.
Datum. Yeah.
Datum. The datum. And zero elevation is the sea level, the mean sea level at New York Harbor. Okay. So FEMA flood zone map search, you could do that. You could check the NAR flood map search through the NAR RPR app. You could check it also through Remine Pro, which you get for free with Garden State MLS membership, or the standard version with All Jersey MLS. But you can order flood map certifications for free, I think, through the All Jersey MLS. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not for free, for a fee. From floodstatus.com, you can get these discounted flood determination reports that go like this. Come on. So you guys see this? Here's a flood status. All right, let me copy the link. I'll even share it with you. For $30, you could order a report about the flood status of the property. And it shows maps with all the details and the information drawn out, has the property boundaries drawn here, shows you if you're in a flood zone or not, and if you're required to carry flood insurance or not. And yeah, they have these determination reports like this that you could offer for your clients, that they could order it on their own, or you could order it for them. How to read the flood certificate, requirements versus ratings. So this is all part of the flood report. And you can get that through this link. And the FEMA portal is where you could search right now. You just search anytime, see if a property is in a flood zone by looking at the FEMA website or using one of our other tools, which I have on this slide here showing you, the RPR or other resources. So here you can just plug in an address of a property and see if it's in a flood zone. Here, I'll show you one of my old properties, which was redrawn into a flood zone. You know, the property I used to own. And you can see it's in a flood zone. You see it's within the blue area. So they redrew it after we had one of those last storms, not Sandy, it was another one that we had after that, where we had that big storm surge. The water came in here through the Arthur Kill, and the water actually went all the way up to the end of the block where there's a stop sign over here. That stop sign, the top of it was sticking out from under the water. That's how high the water came all the way out here. So even though I had, this was my house over here, I had about 10, yeah, maybe about close to 10 steps going up to the first floor. So it was a little bit elevated. But it still was under about 3 feet of water. So that storm surge brought it in pretty good. It actually blew out all the basement windows too, from all the pressure, the weight of the water, I guess, blew in the basement windows. That's the way you can tell if it's in a flood zone. All right. Now, RESPA regulations. RESPA is the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, if you recall. Let's highlight this if we don't have it highlighted already on page 387. That RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, formerly administered by HUD, is now administered by the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And it was created to ensure that the buyer and seller in residential real estate transactions have knowledge of all settlement costs. That's the purpose of the HUD-1 RESPA settlement statement. However, the CFPB took those old forms and they renamed them or changed them around, merged others. So now the HUD-1 was replaced with the CD, the closing disclosure. Okay. So what is the purpose of the settlements, the real estate settlement statement? In this case, that's going to be the CD, the closing disclosure now, to ensure that all parties in the transaction have knowledge of all settlement costs. That's what you need to know for exams. You'll definitely get that on state exam for sure. Maybe on the school as well. So RESPA requirements apply when the purchase is financed by federally related mortgage loans. So federally related loans include those that are made by banks or other lenders whose depositors' money is insured by the FDIC or FSLIC, insured by the FHA or guaranteed by the VA, those loans that are made by the REC-D, or those administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, or intended to be sold by the lender to Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, or Freddie Mac. I just seen a commercial for them on TV this morning, actually, talking about home ownership, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. All right. So RESPA, formerly administered by HUD, is now administered by the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And RESPA settlement statement is now called the CD, the closing disclosure. It was created to ensure the buyer and seller on residential transactions have knowledge of all the settlement costs. Anybody who's involved that's getting paid a fee or commission in this real estate transaction, it must be disclosed on that settlement statement. It's required on any federally related first mortgage loan to buy real estate. It's not required for refinancing, reverse mortgages, commercial loans, investment properties, cash purchases, or movable dwellings. RESPA Section 8. This is a different Section 8 because we're not talking about the rental subsidies. We're talking about Section 8 of RESPA law. Prevents kickbacks in real estate transactions. Those are payments of unearned fees to anyone who didn't take a role in actively working in the real estate transaction. Section 9 of RESPA says a borrower can use any title or insurance company they want. They don't have to use the one that the lender is pushing. And Section 10 of RESPA requires lenders to limit the amounts of money that they keep in escrow for the coming year's taxes and insurance payments. They have to audit that at least once a year and return any overages in excess of $50 above the tolerance that they're allowed to keep. I'm not sure what the tolerance limitation is there, but they got to do that auditing, and amounts in excess of $50 need to be returned. Okay. So. So you may want to have in the book section 8.1 highlighted. I got a little clear definition here though, but here we could write RESPA here. Section 8 prohibits kickbacks, and pertaining to section 10, lenders are not required to maintain escrow accounts because you don't need to include your taxes and insurance in your mortgage payment. But if you do, lenders often will have an escrow account to build up those funds for the coming year's payments. But they are limited in how much they can collect from you in advance. This is often what makes up your closing costs when you buy a house. Let me know when everybody got the highlights that they needed there.
I got it.
Okay.
Oh, 1 minute.
Okey-doke.
Yeah, done.
Sorry?
Done.
Okay, everybody got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So the CFPB merged older forms, the TILA statement, the RESPA statement, into something they call now TRID, the TILA RESPA Integrated Disclosure. It applies to most federally related first and second mortgages. So let's highlight that here on page 388 as well, down at the bottom of the page there. TRID requirements apply to most federally related first and second mortgages used to buy residential property. They do not apply to home equity lines of credit, mobile homes, reverse mortgages, cash transactions, or commercial properties. So the settlement statement, the old one called the HUD-1, can be used for these transactions still because it was easy to use and anybody can pretty much fill it out. And when you do closings for even like refinancing or purchasing of any of these types of properties, you're going to need some kind of document to track all the expenses and everything and stay organized, the payments and expenses. So they do allow you to use the old HUD-1 RESPA settlement statement, which has now been replaced by the CD. But for these transactions that don't need to follow the TRID rule, you could still use the HUD-1 statement to close on these transactions, or whoever's preparing that paperwork. Now, under TRID rules, the lender is required to provide the 5-page closing disclosure, the CD, at least 3 days before the closing, with a minimum of 7 business days between the issuance of the loan estimate and the closing. Here's a portion of the CD that you could find on page 390, section G over here. Oh, not G, section H. number 5, lines 5 and 6. Those are important lines we need to check out. We need to make sure that our commissions are stated properly there, that our commission amounts are correct on the closing disclosure. Okay. Before the closing, way before the closing, you guys have to submit your commission bill for your office to the attorneys and the closing agent, whoever's handling the closing, to ensure that we get paid correctly. Kind of important, right? So make sure that this number on the closing statement matches the number that we submitted on our commission bill. Don't leave the closing unless that gets straightened out first. We want to get paid the right amount of money and not have to chase after it later, right? So these are some of the things that are covered on the CD. So when a borrower receives the CD, they should compare the first 3 pages of the CD to the loan estimate that they got at the beginning of the transaction. There should be no drastic changes, because at the beginning of the transaction, it was just an estimate of your closing costs. The CD should be your actual closing costs, and they should not be too far off from one another. All right, coming up, next few slides, we're going to see that a second search of the public records is often done at the moment of closing, just to ensure that no other liens or encumbrances popped up that were not in the public record at the time that we ordered the title search, which could have been weeks before the closing. The seller executes and signs an affidavit of title showing that if any liens or anything like that popped up afterwards, the seller signing the affidavit to show that they haven't done anything to encumber it. They didn't not pay any contractors or get any divorces, that they're in possession of the property, things of that nature. We'll go over that in detail. Inspection of the premises. We got to do that final walkthrough, release of the existing liens from the previous owner, and prorations, the final financial adjustments at closing. And then we're done with this chapter. So the title procedure. So on the date when the sale is actually completed, the date of delivery of the deed, the buyer has a title commitment or an abstract that was issued several days or even weeks before the closing. They ordered that abstract of title. For this reason, the title or abstract company is usually required to make a second search of the public records, because there's been some time since their last search to the time the closing happened. What if something happened in between that time frame? So the seller then is also required to execute an affidavit of title. So what is an affidavit? It's a sworn statement. But what is this affidavit of title? It's a sworn statement in which the seller assures the title company and the buyer that since the date of the title examination, there have been no judgments, bankruptcies, or divorces involving the seller, no repairs or improvements that have not been paid for, or that they're in possession of the premises. And through this affidavit, this sworn statement, the title company obtains the right to sue the seller if their statements prove incorrect. So who signs the affidavit of title? It's signed by the seller, because the buyer ordered a title search of the public records to make sure there's no liens or encumbrances other than those they may be aware of already on the property. But it's possible that some can pop up in between the time they did the title search and the closing. So the seller signs this affidavit just confirming they did nothing that could create such a lien or encumbrance on the property. That's all that is, because the buyer already has insurance now. So this is protection for the title company to sue the seller if any of their statements prove false. So here we go, just another slide about the affidavit. I put up my notes on it. So the title insurance company has the seller sign it at the moment of closing. It verifies they have not encumbered the property since the title search was done, swearing that they have no judgments, no unpaid contractors for repairs or improvements, that they didn't file for bankruptcy or divorce, and the seller is in possession of the premises. And by doing so, the title company obtains the right to sue the seller if they lied or any of it's untrue. And after all conditions are met, the closing agent, attorney, or title company, whoever that is, acting as the closing agent, disperses the purchase price to the seller. The seller gives the keys and the original CO and fire inspection certificates to the buyer, along with the deed to the property. Deeds get recorded. The seller records and pays for recording costs, showing that they're no longer the owner and have cleared or paid off all the liens. And the buyer records and pays for the recording, for recording the deed in their name and the mortgage as required by their lender so that they could secure that first lien position.
Question for this part, for the deed being recorded, does the homeowner or do we take part of any of that?
Closing agent, the attorneys handle that.
Okay.
You may want to just talk to your client and ensure that the attorney's doing that. You know, there are incompetent attorneys out there, or attorneys that just don't remember the whole process because they don't specialize in doing real estate transactions or closings, and they need to refer to their school notes. Yeah, I've had that happen before. And I've had an attorney tell me, "Oh, it's been a while since I've done one of these. I gotta pull out my old school notes and brush up on this." I was just like, "Oh boy," because he was a litigation attorney. You got different attorneys that do different things. You got contract attorneys, you got real estate attorneys, you got patent attorneys, you got litigation attorneys. There's all kinds of attorneys that specialize, just like doctors. So even though they took a real estate 101 class in college to get their degree to practice law, they may not remember everything, right? Especially if it's not their specialization. So checking the premises. Oh, we check the premises a lot, right? Since we got the listing, we went and checked out the property. Then buyers taking tours and inspections getting done, appraisals getting done, and then final walkthroughs. So the property has a lot of walkthroughs of checking the premises. Remember, I told you guys when to do your final walkthrough?
Closing date.
On the way to closing. It's a major inconvenience to do it on the day of closing, but hey, stuff could happen in between. I had that instance where that guy stripped out the kitchen. We did the final walkthrough the evening before the closing, and the guy stripped out the kitchen from the time after we were there to the next morning. So yeah, you want to make sure you do it on the way to closing. So we want to also make sure that the seller releases, makes sure that or at least their attorney, it's their job to release any existing liens on the property. We don't want the buyer signing and purchasing a property when those existing liens have not been paid off or released from the property, because liens attach to properties, not to property owners. And if this property is getting paid off through the proceeds of the mortgage loan that the buyer is getting, we want to make sure those liens were released. That could create a problem if it's not. I had a friend that I became friends with her around time, but she was already in a real estate transaction, and then she started asking me about stuff because her agent wasn't doing things right, and they were having issues, and one of the issues is she put her property on the market for sale, and they got a buyer, and then it got all the way down to doing the title search, and that's when they found out that the guy she bought the property from, his mortgage loan was still showing on the property. Those liens were never released. So her attorney never followed up to make sure that they were released. That was part of his job, right? You figure, no big deal. She ordered title insurance, right? Yeah, she did. But the attorney pocketed the money and he never actually bought the title insurance. And she found that out when she was going to him and saying, hey, we got a problem. We got the existing lien showing on the property from the previous owner. And now it shows like I got 2 mortgage loans on the property when I don't. I need you to fix this. I can't find a title insurance policy. If you could send it to me. He's like, well, that's your problem. Hung up on her. Yeah, that's pretty messed up, right? So what do you do now? Said, get another attorney and sue your attorney. She went and tried to get attorneys to sue her attorney, and none of them would touch it with a 10-foot pole. Now, attorneys have no problem suing other attorneys. They do it all the time. But why did they not want to sue this guy? Well, because he's now a New Jersey Superior Court justice. He's a judge. So they're like, hey, we may need to appear before him someday. We don't want to get on his bad side. So I was like, damn. So I guess you could file a complaint against the bar. It'll go against his license, and you get so many claims against you, your insurance starts to go up through the roof as an attorney. So that's a way to hit him. Hit him in the pocketbook, right? Hit him where it hurts. Did you know that if you're going to sue an attorney or file a complaint against them with the Bar Association, you actually have to pay a fee to file that complaint? And that fee is between $3,000 and $5,000. I guess they don't make it very easy for you to file those complaints against attorneys, huh? So I don't know how she ended up fixing the problem, but she eventually did. She hired a title company and bought title insurance. It took them 2 years, though, to clear it up. So that closing didn't happen right away. But it took them 2 years because you figure, well, wait, why would it take so long? Just go back to the original lender. The lender knows that their loan was paid off, right? They could just go and record the document now in the public record as satisfaction of lien. Well, they went out of business. It was like one thing after the other that made it a unique, difficult thing. But I mean, it's not uncommon for lenders to go out of business. They get bought up by other banks, or they just go out of business. And she had like the triple Lindy of problems there, one right after the other. So it took her 2 years. So don't assume that the attorneys are doing what they should be doing, because remember the great words of Benny Hill. Don't assume, because when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Right? That's what happens when you assume. All right. So remember the estoppel certificate and the reduction certificate? Well, you often need to get a payoff statement to pay off that existing mortgage lien from the seller. And how are you going to do that? Well, when a buyer's assuming it, well, this is when they're assuming the loan. Let's see. In some areas, it's customary for a buyer to obtain a mortgage reduction certificate, sometimes inaccurately referred to as an estoppel certificate, from the lender, stating the exact balance due and the last interest payment that was made. Okay, so this way we know the exact amount for the payoff. A closing in escrow is when everybody's not sitting at the closing table together. The buyer and the seller sitting across the table with their attorneys and their real estate agents, all signing documents and being pleasant with each other after a battle of, getting attorney review and inspections and negotiations and going through all that stuff. So closing in escrow is the closing that's done by a neutral third party who's acting as the closing agent. Often one of the attorneys or the title company. But the seller shows up in advance, signs any documents that they need to. They drop off the keys to the property and any, the certificate of occupancy and fire inspection certificates. It could be days before the actual closing or earlier in the day. And then later on, the buyer comes. So they're not all sitting at the table across from each other. And the buyer just fills out their documents. The real estate agent brings any money that it was being held in their broker's escrow account. Don't forget that part. Don't go showing up to the closing with your hand out, wanting your commission check and not bringing the buyer's money. Ooh, that makes you look bad, you know. So don't do that. You know, everybody does that at one time at the beginning of their career because they forget. You need to learn that lesson, and it's a valuable one, and you will not forget it again. I'm trying to tell you right now, don't forget that. Okay. Don't go to the closing and forget to bring the buyer's money that you collected at the beginning of the transaction as a good faith deposit that you put in a broker's escrow account. You need to get the broker to write out the check to the closing agent so that you could bring it to the closing. Okay. After all conditions are met, the agent then disperses the purchase price to the seller. They give the keys and the original CO and fire certificates to the buyer along with the deed. They record the deed and the mortgage and record the satisfaction of mortgage documents for the seller. So this is what happens in the closing and escrow. That escrow closing, where is it? Closing and escrow, page 395. There's no one-liner there for us to sign. However, they show you here, in states in the western section of the country, the majority of transactions are closed in escrow, but this system is seldomly used in New Jersey. In an escrow closing, a disinterested third party, neutral third party, is to act as the escrow agent, coordinating the closing activities, and they do everything that I just explained here. Okay. But it is gaining popularity a bit in New Jersey. But many other states use them. Here, I'll even write that in here. I don't need to do the screenshot from the book, but I guess I could write that in here. Closing and escrow. Where is that? There we go. Most Western states use escrow closings or perform. All right, that's all put in there, but it is being used from time to time. All right. Preparing the closing statements. Brokers' commissions, usually paid by the seller, but not always now. As of 2024, after the NAR lawsuit, the buyer may be responsible for paying their own agent's commission. That is possible. Attorney's fees, each side pays for their own. Recording expenses, each side pays their own. Realty transfer fee is a tax always paid by the seller. A mansion tax, the buyer will pay 1% of the sales price if the value is $1 million or more. But I got a note here, or I should say factoid, right? New Jersey Governor Murphy recently made a change to this in the law. Told you he's making a lot of changes on his way out the door. He's throwing, sticks of dynamite behind him on his way out. The buyer is no longer responsible for this payment. Instead, it's now shifted to the seller. and it's a graduated payment, and it's no longer just 1%, it's up to 3.5%, depending on the value of the property. So, no, their administration is not making real estate more expensive for anybody. It's just another money grab. Title insurance. By the way, the realty transfer tax that's always paid by the seller. Anybody know where that money goes? What it's used for? Why does the state charge a sales tax to the seller? What do they do with that money? What happened to no taxation without representation, right? So what does that money go to? What is it used for? Well, a couple of years back, Governor Christie tried to do away with the realty transfer tax. But he had strong opposition in our state against that. Because politicians, they rarely have a tax that they don't like, that they're not in love with. So they did not want to part with this one because it's a lot of money that they get every year from this. And what is the purpose? Why was that realty transfer tax created? Well, so that we could create a hall of record keeping for keeping track of the ownership documents and transfers of ownership for real estate. Wait, don't we already have that in all 21 counties? That was created a long time ago. Yeah. So where does the money go now? It goes to the general fund so the politicians can piss it away. That's where it goes. Guess we don't really follow the United States Constitution here in New Jersey, right? No taxation without representation. You guys remember that? We had a war that we started with England. Remember that? When this country was created? Had something called the Boston Tea Party. How much was that tax? What was it, like 0.5%? We went to war over 0.5%. How much we pay in taxes today for various things? Shoot. What's the average sales tax in New Jersey for miscellaneous items? What are we, almost 7% or something like that?
6.625.
6.625. Okay, so they lowered it back down a little bit. Okay. So yeah, it's wow. Our country went to war over less. But now we're just like, we throw our hands up in the air. We're like, what are you going to do? Politicians, you know? So would you give up? We should pull out our pitchforks and run down there. But no, we don't do that in a civilized society anymore. Now, instead of going down there and pulling them out and tarring and feathering these politicians, instead now we just don't vote for them, right? We replace them with our votes. But wait, do we? Or are you so dedicated to your team because you're a Democrat or a Republican and you never will vote against your team, even if they got some bad players? Unfortunately, that's the way politics works, and this is why we keep getting worse and worse. You know, title insurance is paid by the buyer. Loan fees are paid by the buyer. Tax reserves and insurance reserves for the upcoming year's property taxes and homeowners insurance paid by the buyer. Additional mortgage-related fees paid by the buyer, but some can be negotiated for the seller to pay. Appraisal fees paid by the buyer. Survey fees paid by the buyer. It's expensive to purchase a house. There's a lot of additional fees that the buyer pays. But yet, the state keeps taking prorations. Now, that's the last math problem we're going to do in this chapter, is determining whatever's a debit to one side is usually a credit to the other. Credits are given to whoever paid for it, whatever it may be. Ooh, that's a good statement right there that I gave you. That's a good way to get questions right on exams. Who gets a credit at closing? If you ever get a question on an exam that asks somebody who gets a credit at closing, well, my answer is whoever paid for it, whatever it may be. So, a debit or charge, an amount that a party is being debited, owes and must pay at the closing. A credit is an amount entered in a person's favor, either an amount that the party has already paid or an amount that the party must be reimbursed for. So, right over here, a question underneath it. Who gets a credit? And the answer, whoever paid for it, whatever it may be. This way, you don't have to overthink things. Because if I ask you, who gets a credit for the deposit money? Who gets a credit for the deposit to purchase a house? You know, the buyer put down their good faith deposit at the beginning of the transaction. Who gets a credit for that money? Often people start thinking, well, the seller's getting that money, so doesn't the seller get the credit? You're overthinking. Who gets a credit? Whoever paid for it. In this case, the buyer paid the deposit, so the buyer gets the credit. They get the credit towards their purchase price. Even though the seller's getting the money, the buyer gets a credit for that amount towards their purchase price. You understand? But to prevent us from having to think out these entire processes, no matter how convoluted a situation they may ask you on a question on exam, I put together this statement for you. It keeps things simple, stupid, so that there's no way you could get it wrong. If you remember to ask yourself a question about the question. When they ask you who gets a credit for this or that, you say, well, who paid for it? That's the person who gets the credit. Whether it's taxes, whether it's for oil that's in the oil tank for heating the house, or whatever the payment is for. Okay. You guys got those highlights and those notes there?
Yes.
Okay. I know that this something is different here. I already wrote that. This is an older screenshot, but it's a better explanation. So let me take a look and see what is different. Oh, with their stupid memory tips here again. And let's see. Oh, the explanation in the paragraph too. So you don't have this space here to write this here, so instead write it on the side somewhere. Yeah. Who gets a credit? Whoever paid for it, whatever it may be. Make a note about this. Page 396. And I need to know which slide number this is. Give me 1 second. That is slide 36. All right. So prorations are the final financial adjustments at closing. These expenses are fairly divided between the seller and the buyer. Accrued items are credits to the buyer, and prepaid items are credits to whoever paid for it. Credit is an amount entered in one's favor. A debit is a charge or an amount one owes. Arrears is the opposite of an advance. It's a payment that's due at the end of a period, the opposite of paying in advance, when you ever hear that term arrears. Whatever is a credit to one side is usually a credit to the other, unless it was like the rent that was paid by a tenant, right? Then that's a little bit different. So who gets a credit at closing? Whoever paid for it, whatever it may be. The remaining heating oil in the tank, the seller's agent should take it upon themselves to get their oil company, the seller's oil company, to come out and take a measurement of the remaining amount of heating oil in that tank, so that they could bill the buyer for it. Okay, so they find out how many gallons of oil are left in the tank, and then the buyer has to pay for that amount. And well, how much do they pay? Well, they pay whatever the going rate is for the oil on the day of closing. So the escrow deposit was paid by the buyer, so the buyer gets a credit. Prepaid taxes, seller prepaid the taxes, and they may not be living there anymore for the taxes that they paid in advance. So they're going to get a credit for any prepaid taxes they paid for a time period where they're no longer going to be living there. And for if they're delinquent in their taxes, well, then the buyer is going to have to pay them to get caught up. And the buyer will get a credit towards those payments that they made for taxes that they did not live there during that period. So they get a credit from the proceeds of the sale. Okay. The seller usually pays all the recording charges, the filing fees that are necessary to clear all defects and furnish the purchaser with a clear title. You got to make sure that happens. You know, that didn't happen for my one friend there. She had an issue with that. They did not record the clearing of that satisfaction of mortgage. So that created a problem for her when she tried to sell the house years and years later. It took her 2 years to clear it up. So the purchaser pays for recording charges incident to the actual transfer of title into their name. This is on page 397 at the top under recording expenses. All right, the realty transfer fee, that's the tax. They call it a fee. The realty transfer fee is always paid by the seller. It's a tax they must pay. The mansion tax is paid for by the seller. But as of 7/10/2025, if the value of the property is $1 million or more, no matter if it's vacant, unimproved, or undeveloped land, unimproved or developed land, the seller needs to pay this tax. Even though they call it a mansion tax, it gives you the impression that there's a mansion sitting there on the property, right? Well, that's how they got the taxpayers to vote for it. See, politicians are cowards. They didn't vote to create this law. Instead, they wrote the law and they put it on the ballot. You know, anytime that there's an election for governor or any other or president or anything like that. You guys ever see those public option questions on the ballots on the sides? If you do not know the intimate details of those questions and what it's about, I suggest you always vote no, because it's usually politicians trying to be crafty with the wording, getting you to pass some kind of nonsense. So unless you're absolutely positive about what it's about, always vote no for those public option questions. I found out that more often than not, they're nonsense that you probably don't want. You know, like that cashless bail, which just made crime flourish, and judges were letting people out of, that are arrested for serious crimes, letting them out without because they're poor and they don't have the money, so cashless bail. But even though they got those, people who will come in, the bondsmen, they'll come in, they'll pay out the bond. So this is just a way to let more criminals back out on the street. And I don't want to get into that anymore. But when they created the mansion tax, they worded it on the ballot that it's a 1% tax for anybody who sells their property of worth $1 million or more will have to pay a 1% of the sale price. And they called it the mansion tax. Now they said the property, so they said it correctly because technically it doesn't have to be a mansion. It could just be raw land. If there's so much land that's being sold and the value of it is $1 million or more, the seller has to pay a 1% mansion tax on it. But there's no mansion. Why do they call it a mansion tax? Because they're trying to plant a seed, an image in your head that that's a rich guy. And, we all have to hate the rich, They got this class warfare thing amongst these politicians that they try to get you to vote on things. They manipulate your thoughts by planting a seed in there that these are people with mansions. I'm never going to have a mansion, so screw them. Yeah, F the man. Let's stick it to the man, right? Let's charge them that tax. Let them pay their fair share, right? Isn't that the nonsense we hear all the time? But the devil's in the details that they did not put on that ballot question. It could be vacant, raw, unimproved land. Let me ask you, when a builder is building low income and affordable housing, or just a regular house, you think that when they build these big complexes and they buy all this land, they're not spending at least $1 million on their land? So you think they're going to eat the cost of that additional tax? Or do you think that they're going to build it into the sale price and add it to the sale price of every individual unit that they sell or rent? They're not taking a loss on that. They're going to charge you. So when they sell that condo that 2-bedroom condo that was only originally like 200-something thousand, well, now they're going to add that 1% or more because they could charge an administrative fee to try to figure all this stuff out and maybe even make a little money off of charging that. So they may charge even more than what the tax is to cover the tax that they were billed in advance. So when you stuck it to the man, who'd you really stick it to? Stuck it to yourself, because the builder's not losing that money. They're building it they're going to add it into the sale price of each individual low income or average income person's home purchase. See how politicians stick it to you?
Does this also apply to commercial?
Yeah, land, any land. Any land, they call it a mansion tax, but it's any land worth any property. They worded it as property, not land. So they called it the mansion tax. And when the property is sold, if it's worth $1 million or more, you pay 1% of the tax, 1% of the sale price. However, lovely Governor Murphy recently made it so that this tax was paid for by the buyer. Now they switched it to the seller. Seller has to pay this tax now. And they jacked it up from 1% up to 3.5%, depending on the value of the purchase price. Which I got a breakdown of that on the next slide, how that works. So the realty transfer fee, I want you to highlight on page 397, is always charged to the seller. That's the sales tax when you sell your house.
Does this mansion tax falls under the transfer fee additional to the fee, right?
Yeah, it's additional.
Okay. But it falls under the transfer fee and the,
No, they got a different name for it.
okay.
Okay, you got the mansion tax. It's called the mansion tax. Actually, they renamed the mansion tax. Well, actually, no, it's still called the mansion tax, but it's referred to as a graduated tax.
Okay. So then there's the realty transfer fee and then there's that other
The
fee.
graduated tax, yeah.
And it'll be laid out separately.
Maybe they lump it all together, but yeah, you could add it up separately, sure. I'll show it to you how it works in a moment. I'll even show you calculators. They call them RTF calculators. You can look them up online. New Jersey RTF calculators. Most title companies will have them on their websites, but you also have, the New Jersey Treasury site has a calculator like that. The Realtors Association got a calculator. You can find a lot of those. I'll give you a couple links to calculators that you could see. So the realty transfer fee is always charged to the seller in a real estate transaction. You need to know that, so highlight it. $397. Now, this is the way that mansion/luxury tax is, even though it could be applying to raw land. So it's no longer a proposed change. The proposed change is official. As of Monday, June 30th, 2025, New Jersey implemented a new tiered mansion tax that shifts the cost from buyers to sellers. So here's what you need to know. What changed? Starting July 10th, 2025, sellers are now responsible for an additional 1% tax of any residential and most commercial property that sells for over $1 million. This is a major shift from the previous law where the buyer were the ones who pay the 1% mansion or luxury tax, but it also applies to raw land. So it's a tiered tax. So the new tax will be paid entirely by the seller in amounts in excess of $1 million. The seller will also have to pay, on top of the transfer fee, they have to pay 1% mansion tax remains, but the responsibility shifts from the buyer to the seller. Now, if the property is $2 million, there's a 2% tax. So it works like this. Over $1 million up to $2 million, it's 1%. From $2 million to $2.5 million, it's 2%. The amount between 2 million and $2.5 million, the amount between $2.5 million to $3 million is 2.5%. From 3 million to $3.5 million, it's 3%. And the amount between 3.5 million and above, it's 3.5% tax. So it's a graduated tax. You don't just say, oh, the property was 3 million, so it's 3% tax. So for the first million, it's 1%. For the amount from 1 to 2, it's 2%. The amount between 2 and 2.5, it's 2.5%. That's what they mean by graduated tax. Okay. And there's RTF calculators that can figure it out for you. I'll show you in the next slide. Here's a bunch of them. If you want, I'll share them and these resources with you. I also have them in the ClassLinks Word document, but I'll share them here as well. Boom. So New Jersey's RTF calculator, let's click on that one. Let me also close a couple slides I got open here. Boom, 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 and get us there. So here's New Jersey's realty transfer fee calculator, okay? And you could check off whether it's no exemptions, it's regular sale, or if it's for somebody who's blind or disabled or moderate income, or if they're a senior citizen, or if it's new construction, okay? So let's just say it's a regular sale, and the property value is $400,000, right? That's 400,000, okay? How much is the realty transfer fee that someone's going to pay when they sell their house? $3,215 tax to sell your home. That's $400,000. Where does that money go? to the general fund that politicians use for whatever. So everybody in the state that's selling a property is paying taxes like this amount. That's a lot of tax right there, isn't it? All right, let's jack this up to $1 million. So we'll add another zero there. Got to have 7 spaces, right? So we got 3, 6, 7. Okay, now we're in the millions. Okay, but that's a million. It's the amount over a million. So $1,001. So a property sells for $1 million. Oh, hold on a second. Let's do this so you can see a comparison. A property sells for $1 million. What's the tax that they're going to pay? $9,575 for $1 million. But if it's over $1 million, so $1,001 the house sells for, let's see what the difference in taxes that they're going to pay is, okay? Let's see how fair this is. $9,575 for $1 million home, or $1 million property. If it's $1 more, you're now paying $19,581.06. Yeah, see the look on Doris's face. Yeah, so the realty transfer fee is $95.81 and the mansion tax is an additional $10,000 and a penny. Tell me it's not a money grab from greedy politicians. What are they doing with it? Why do they need more money? So they could piss it away in their pet projects. All right. Whatever. Here's some more calculators. We got one on the Realtor web, New Jersey Realtor website. Okay, here's a different calculator from the New Jersey Realtor website. We could put that there, 400,000. And they give you the breakdown. 400,000 is $3,215. And remember, if it's $1,001, oh, that's not $1,001. That is. The transfer fee plus the graduated percent fee. That's what they call it now, instead of a mansion tax. So the total is $19,000 and change. So for all contracts executed prior to July 10th, 2025, where the deed is recorded before November 15th, any graduated percentage fees paid in excess of 1% will be refunded to the seller. Oh. Okay. So where does this money go? Let's understand the realty transfer fee. It basically tells you it goes to the general tax. Let me see. So the realty transfer fee was established in 1968 to offset the cost of tracking real estate transactions upon the transfer of the deed to the buyers. Okay, well, we already have that central hall of record keeping in all 21 counties, right? And anytime somebody transfers the ownership, so this transfer fee was created to create that hall of record keeping. Now we have that system in place. So you figure, well, maybe they're using it like on the parkway to fund like repairs and the maintenance of it to keep up with it, right? Well, no, because anytime you sell a property, you also have to pay recording fees. So the recording fees are what would fund and keep up and maintain the that central hall of records. So they don't need this transfer fee anymore. So the payment of the RTF is a prerequisite for recording a deed in the public record. A graduated percentage fee, the new one, that mansion tax, is imposed on the seller for transactions exceeding $1 million. And it's tiered structure. Okay, well, let's see, where does that money go? The RTF and the GPF are usually collected at the real estate closing by the legal representative or title insurance agents, according to the recording of the deed in the county's offices. The funds are then shared between the state and the counties. For what? They're just shared. It's general fund. The state portion of the revenue is allocated to neighborhood revitalization, shore protection, and the state's general fund. So whatever. They spend it on whatever. They're just giving you some ideas of where they spend it. All right. The RTF does not apply to sales for less than $100. Why? Do we have a lot of houses less than $100 in New Jersey? Or the transactions made between husbands and wives or parents and children. Yeah, because it's a gift. So senior citizens, blind or disabled persons in low and moderate income housing may qualify for a partial exemption from the RTF. An affidavit of consideration must be filed with any deed in which a full partial payment is claimed from the RTF. Okay, whatever. It's all bullshit. And here's another one I found on some website called Housing. I don't know if this is a broker's site or if this is just like another version of Zillow. I don't know. Where they give a breakdown of the prices here too. So here's a $1.5 million price. And they got the transfer fee of $15,000 and change. And then the mansion tax separately is $15,000. So that's a total transfer fee of $30,000 in taxes for a $1.5 million property. Doesn't matter if it's residential or commercial. Let's see the commercial. Immediately turns 3 or 4 family. Doesn't matter. But industrial, no. What about farmland with a residential building? Still 30,000. What about farmland without a residential building? Okay. So if it's just farmland. What about vacant land? I wonder why builders often buy farmland. All right. So you can see what the RTF fee schedules are from the Treasury's webpage. So if you want to create your own calculator, you could go to see the RTF fees, the realty transfer fees, because they could possibly change over time. But we do have a guide here in the book, a chart in the book that goes over these things too. But what needs to be updated in the book is that the mansion tax is now paid by the seller, and it's actually called an RTF. I'm sorry, it's called a graduated transfer tax. So here's the Treasury page for all kinds of other issues. Property administration. Tax maps. On the state level? That's for CAD, tax map. Oh, this is for your software. Okay, but you could download that stuff. Interesting though. Oh, here's the farmland assessment. There we go. Rollback tax, did they change that? Anyway, so how much in tax do people with farmland pay? What is your property tax bill? You get a 98% property tax deduction. Okay, here we're talking about the transfer taxes for the sales. Oh, look at this. I think we found the page. Property tax tables, abstract property valuation classifications, and municipal aid calculators. Oh. I don't know what the difference of each one of these is, but let's take a look. I think we just found some information. Yes, we did. It's always good when you find the mother lode. Okay, these are tax breaks and deductions. All right. Anyway, on the website over there, they have all kinds of data, municipal aid calculator, property tax. I have all this stuff on this one slide here, but did I share with you just the calculators or all that information, all those links? Don't know.
Don't know.
Oh no, okay, I shared everything. Property tax information, everything was shared with you. Okay. Let's get past that. So this is the page, this is the bottom of page 397. Basically, the left side of the page is for properties valued up to $350,000, and the right side of the page is for properties over $350,000. How much you pay in the realty transfer tax, how much the seller pays. And then the bottom over here is for people who are blind or disabled or low income. Senior citizens, blind, disabled, or low income. These are the transfer fees that they pay when they sell their homes. And down at the bottom, it says paid by the buyer. We could actually cancel that because it is not paid by the buyer anymore. It's paid by the seller. So let me see if I can get, here we go. Let's copy this. And do that. And we'll call it paid by the seller. It is now paid by the seller. I'll put that right there. And we'll just change the fill color to green. There we go. So the seller pays this mansion tax now. Remember, and it's graduated up to 3.5%. So how do you calculate this tax? In case they give you a question on it, I doubt they will. I highly doubt they will, because you'd also need this chart too. But just to show you how it works. If you sell a house that's $150,000 and you're not low income, you're just average person, you're not disabled or blind or anything. For the first $150,000, the tax is $2 for every $500 of value. So how many times is 500 going to 150,000? 150,000 divided by 500 goes in 300 times. 300 times $2, that tax is $600 for a $150,000 property. Now, if the property is $200,000, well, for the first $150,000, it's $600 tax. And for the amount between 150 to 200,000, the tax goes up to $3.35 per $500 of value. So how many times is 500 going to 50,000? The amount between 150 and 200? 100 times. 100 times $3.35 is $3.35. So if you're buying a $200,000 house, the tax is $935. You see how they work it? That's a graduated tax. You don't just skip to here to this second bracket because it's $200,000. So up to 150, it's this amount. The amount between 150 and 200,000, it's this amount. The amount between 200 and 350 is this amount, 390 for $500. Now, if you were to look at properties over $350,000, well, everybody's talking about the rich paying their fair share, I guess. Well, even though this is not necessarily rich. Look, if you buy a house that's $350,000 or more, you're already paying more. Instead of paying $2 for every $500 of value, you're paying $290. And for the next bracket, you're paying $425 instead of $335. And for the next bracket, you're paying $480 instead of $390. And then for all the other amounts, $530 per $500 of value, $580 per $500 of value, and $605 per $500 of value. Plus, when you get to sell the property, you get to pay that mansion tax, that graduated fee on top of it. Taxation without representation, what do you say? I just want to show you how that worked. If you guys wanted to do that highlighting, just to separate the left from the right and the top from the bottom, because this part is for, and cross out moderate. This has nothing to do with moderate income. Moderate income is up here, okay? The low income and disabled and seniors pay these amounts down on the bottom. Everybody else pays the amount up top. And the left side is for the amounts up to including $350,000. And for the right side, it's for any amount over $350,000. So $350,000 and $1 and more, you're paying these amounts. And I gave you the resources where you could always take a look. So if these amounts ever change, what the tax amounts are for the realty transfer fee, I sent you the links there, and they're in the class links Word document where you could always update it. So if you want to create your own Excel file of how to calculate it, create your own calculator that you put on your own websites. Okay, so how do we prepare the closing statements? Items credited to the buyer. Well, first of all, we don't do this. I mean, I guess we could, but we generally don't. It's attorneys and title companies that do this stuff. The unpaid principal balance of the outstanding mortgage being assumed by a buyer. Interest on existing assumed mortgage not yet paid, accrued. Buyer's earnest money. Unearned portion of the current rent collected in advance. These are the items credited to the buyer. Unearned, earned janitorial salaries, tenant security deposits, purchase money and mortgage if the seller is financing, unpaid water bills, and real estate taxes in the arrears. Items credited to the seller would be the sales price, fuel oil on hand in the remaining oil tank that they paid for in advance, insurance and tax reserves when outstanding mortgage is being assumed by the buyer. Any refund to the seller of prepaid water charge or similar expense, and a portion of the real estate taxes paid in advance. Or you could just go with the statement that I gave you. Who gets a credit at closing? Whoever paid for it, whatever it may be. So arrears is at the end of a term, which a payment's due. That's the opposite of it in advance. Okay, let's see who's responsible for what. The seller's attorney is responsible for all the details about the title. They're responsible for clearing up problems that are found. The buyer's attorney is responsible for doing the research to discover those problems via doing a title search and survey. So understanding these things, you may get questions on these things on exams. Who's responsible for the details to the transaction, the details about the title? Okay, broker's responsibility. That's us, guys. Each agent's responsible to get their client to the closing on time with the appropriate materials, including their IDs. Federal law requires that anytime you buy real estate or sell real estate, you need to show up with your ID. We need to make sure that there's no fraud going on and people are doing what they're supposed to. Now, the brokers and agents collect commissions at closing. So make sure well, actually, I'm skipping here. So buyer's agents escrow check from broker's account, and the buyer needs to bring any additional funds to closing. They need to bring that. The seller's agent, they're responsible for bringing the original CO and fire certificate to the closing, along with all the keys to the house, garage door openers, etc. The brokers and their agents collect commissions at closing, so make sure you send your brokerage commission bills in advance and compare it to the CD, the closing disclosure amounts, and the amount on the broker's check that you get. And then the sales are reported to the IRS by the closing agents, whoever that is, a title company or attorney. Okay. So if you guys want to snap a picture of this slide, I'll give you a sec. Because this stuff is not necessarily highlighted and no one-liners explaining this stuff here in the book. You'd have to read the entire paragraphs here. I'm just kind of summarizing the important information you may need, hint, hint. Okay. So on page 398, arrears are at the end of a term which a payment's due. So when we're talking about prorations, most closings involve the dividing of the financial responsibility between the buyer and the seller for such items as the loan interest, taxes, rents, fuel, utility bills. These allowances are called prorations. They're the final adjustments at the closing. So prorations are necessary to ensure that the expenses are fairly divided between the seller and the buyer. For example, when the taxes have been paid in advance, the seller is entitled to the reimbursement at closing for paying taxes for a period that they're not going to be living there anymore. Okay, so as interest is usually paid in the arrears at the end of a period for which it's due, each payment covers interest for the preceding month. Okay, let's not get into this. Let's just highlight arrears are at the end of a period for which something is due. Accrued items are items to be prorated, such as water bills, interest on an assumed mortgage that are owed by the seller but eventually will be paid by the buyer. The seller therefore gives the buyer credit for these items at closing. Prepaid items are to be prorated, such as taxes, fuel oil left in the tank that have been prepaid by the seller but not fully earned. They're not fully used up. Therefore, they get credit for that. So what are the general rules of prorations? Well, it's generally provided that the buyer owns the property on the day of closing. So in practice, technically, the buyer is responsible for that day's expenses. However, in practice, either the seller or the buyer can be charged with that day's expenses, or they could split them. Okay. It depends whatever the closing agent does. Usually they put it on the buyer. Now, the mortgage interest, general real estate taxes, water taxes, and similar expenses are computed in some areas by using a 360-day calendar year that has 30 days in the month. However, the rules in other areas provide for computing prorations on the basis of the actual number of days in the calendar month at closing. Special assessments, those are those municipal taxes for improvements like sewers, water mains, streets. They're usually paid in annual installments over several years. So sellers are sometimes required to pay off those special assessments entirely at the closing when they sell it. Yeah, it's their unpaid taxes. That's why. Rents are usually adjusted for the actual numbers of days in the month, right? If you are buying a rental property, when is the rent due? Usually at the beginning of the month, right? That's what it says in most people's leases. So if the landlord collected the rents at the beginning of the month and the sale's happening a couple days later, does the seller get to keep the entire month's rent that they collected from the tenant? No. These charges need to be prorated, and the buyer will get those rent payments for the amounts when they own the property. Security deposits are entirely transferred to the buyer because the buyer is going to be responsible for paying back those security deposits to the tenant if they have no damages. Unpaid wages of building employees are prorated as well based on usage. Okay, so it's important to pay attention of how questions are worded. When it comes to prorations, it's either based on a 365 or a 360-day calendar year. So yearly charges are divided by 360-day year. They're based on each month having 30 days in them. If the question specifically tells you to base it on a 365-day calendar year, then you're going to have to know how many days are in each month to actually calculate the exact charges based on the number of days in the month. So I put together this little guide here for you to explain that. And this, you guys remember this maybe. Now, I didn't go to a great school. I went to Linden. You know, they never taught us this in kindergarten, but apparently most people get taught this in kindergarten to figure out how many days are in a month. Damn, I grew up pretty dumb not knowing that, you know. I never was taught this. But look at this. In your knuckles, each knuckle is a high point, and the knuckles have 31 days, and the gaps in between the knuckles have 30 days, except for February, because it has 28 days in the month. Unless it's a leap year, then they have 29. You know, I actually had an uncle that was born on February 29th. So, here's a rhyme that they teach you that goes with it. 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except February, 28 days clear, and 29 each leap year. Okay. So you don't need to remember the song. You just know that 28 days in February and leap years once every 4 years, right? So you got that 29. So, but the knuckles, 31 days, the valleys in between, less than 30 days. Or less than 31 days. So the 30 days, except for February. Okay. That's the way to remember how many days in actual days in a month. If you get a question on exam that's specifically telling you, and you don't, because you can't look at a calendar. Okay. You can't pull up your cell phone. You got to remember how many days are in each month. If you get a question on your state exam that asks you to do a math problem and base it on a 365-day calendar year, you got to know the actual number of days in the month. If they say it's based on a 360-day calendar year, you don't need to remember any of this. Every month is 30 days, including February. That's the way that they do. That's the way it is. So you really got to read the question on the exam. Okay. Yeah, I got a video here. This is actually just a video with the song here. And I got to redo it because my voice is very monotone when I'm doing it. But there you go.
Have you ever used the knuckle calendar? Take the days on your knuckles and the knuckle gaps in order to figure out how many days are in each month. Knuckles have 31 days and the gaps have 30, except February, which only has 28 days unless it's a leap year. Here's a little rhyme to remember how many days in each month.
So corny.
30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except February. 28 days clear, 29 each leap year.
There you go. You could bring that and share it with your children. Let your kids learn how many days are in a month if they went to a shitty school like mine. All right. So anyway, the arithmetic of prorations. Generally speaking, there's several methods. Okay, I just went over them with you. They could either the yearly charge is divided by a 360-day year and 12 months with 30 days in each month. Or you could have it based on a 365-day calendar year. So you got to use the actual number of days in the month. Oh, I'm sorry. So that's all that this is saying. You know, when you're reading through this, it seems all complicated trying to figure out what the hell they're talking about. And it basically depends on how they calculate the charges in a particular area. But we don't do this anyway. Attorneys and closing agents usually do. And if they do, we need to know what the question is. So the question will tell you on exams which to use a 360-day or 365-day. We're going to do a proration math problem to figure this out. Before we do, let's wrap it up here. Closing. The seller's attorney is responsible for all the details of the transaction concerning the closing to the title of the property, such as preparing the deed and making sure any prior liens have been repaid. I already had a slide where I showed you that what the seller's attorney is responsible for, what the buyer's attorney is responsible for, and some other information that I told you you probably get questions on exam for, and to probably take a screenshot of it. Well, if you didn't take a screenshot, well, go back and watch it in the video. Because that was quite a few slides back. But this is just one of those things that were mentioned on that slide. So this is on page 401. All right. Let's learn about that arithmetic of math, which I already explained it to you pretty much, but now I got it here again. You know, attorneys and title companies usually handle this stuff. In some areas, like the southern part of New Jersey, agents may take a more active role and be involved in this, but they're less and less doing this. However, other states, Western states, often the agents do this because attorneys are only used if there's a problem. So prorations are the final adjustments at closing for the expenses paid in advance by the seller or the buyer and credited to the appropriate person who paid for them, for which they did not fully benefit before the closing or for items they have not yet been paid for. Some examples of this would be unused heating oil left in the tank by the closing date, or prepaid taxes for the period which the owners sell the property and they're not going to be living there for the entire term. So the basic rule of thumb is if ever asked a question, who gets a credit, the answer will always be whoever paid for it, whatever it may be. The only real exception is for things like rents and security deposits. It is generally accepted the buyer owns the property on the day of closing, so they'll be charged with that day's closing expenses. But in reality, anybody can be charged with that day's closing expenses. Do you know I had a client, never underestimate the cheapness of people. I had a buyer client that almost got into a fist fight with the seller over who's paying that day's closing costs. Now, if you really break it down, what are the closing costs? They were about $20. $20 for that day's taxes, and you know, that's what it was over. They almost got into a fist fight over it. It's crazy. Never underestimate the cheapness of people. So let's see, prorations can be for various items. Okay, I already told you they could be calculated based on a 360-day calendar year with every month having 30 days in it, or it could be based on a 365-day calendar year in which you need to know the actual number of days in each month. So pay close attention to how questions are asked. All right, here's one. I never cleaned up the slide yet. I'm still creating these slides. I never, as far as the math goes for prorations, but this is a tool I'm teaching you right here. You see this tool? Anytime you get a question that starts asking you about prorations, that means we're going to have to do some math. I want you to bust out a scrap piece of paper and write down the letter for each month. And then just count them to make sure you got 12, because there's 12 months in a year. And I did it really quick sometimes, and I missed a month somewhere. So make sure you count, take your time. You know, you put January, February, March, April. You put down the initial for each month. And then draw a box around all of them. Then you're gonna make a long line, and then count 1. And then count 1, 2, 3, another long line. 1, 2, 3, putting each letter for each month in its own box. That's what we're just drawing the line. But every 3, we're making a long line. So 1, 2, 3, long line. 1, 2, 3, long line. 1, 2, 3, long line. So now you could visually see where a month begins and where a quarter begins and where a quarter ends, because taxes are billed quarterly. They become a lien on the property as of January 1. However, you're not required to pay your property taxes for the whole year in advance. You're billed quarterly. So the beginning of the quarter, the end of a quarter, the beginning of a quarter, the end of a quarter. You have 4 quarters here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this question says, using a 360-day calendar year, if the taxes on a property for sale are $9,500 per year, and the seller paid the first quarter taxes, the closing takes place on March 1st. Who gets a credit and for how much? Well, if the closing's taking place on March 1st, that's right here, right? Right over here. But they paid the taxes for the first quarter. That's right here. So that time in between, the seller paid the taxes, but they're not going to be living there. So who gets a credit? Whoever paid for it. And who paid the taxes in advance? The seller. So right off the bat, we know the seller is going to get a credit. Doesn't this visualization make it a lot easier to see right off the bat who gets a credit without having to just look at the questions, and you don't have any of that other information up there? You don't have that chart. This is a tool that I'm teaching you. It makes it a lot easier to visually see who gets a credit, like that. All right. Now, how much do they get a credit for? Well, if the taxes are $9,500 in a year, you've divided by 12, that's $791.66 a month. Okay. If you were going to figure out a daily charge, you could divide that by 30 days in a month, because they said to use a 360-day calendar year, which would be $26.38 per diem per day. That's what that means. So who gets a credit? The seller. Why? Because they paid up to here, but they're selling over here. So that amount of time in between, they get a credit for. So a full month, $791.66. This is how they make it harder on exam. They make it harder because of the way they write the answer. Okay, but this is another question here. This is a different question. Let's see. Question number 2 here says, using a 360-day calendar year, if the taxes on a property for sale are $9,500 per year, the seller paid the second quarter taxes. That's up to here, as we can see. That's the first quarter. That's the second. The closing takes place on May 17th, January, February, March, April, May. So it's a little bit past half the month, so we draw a line there, right? So the seller paid the taxes up to here, so that time in between, the seller is going to get a credit, right? So who gets a credit? The seller. And for how much? Well, we know there's one full month and then a couple days, right? So one full month. Now, how many days are left in the month? Well, it said 360-day calendar year, so 30 days in a month, right? 30 days in a month minus 17 because it's closing on the 17th. That's 13 days left. But remember, the buyer generally owns the property on the day of closing and is responsible for that day's expenses. So add that day's back in. So it's 14 days. So if the per day charge is $26.38, we'll have 14 days times 26.38. That's $369.32. And one full month is $791.66. So $791.66 plus the 14 days, $369.32. That gives us a grand total of $1,160.98. If we rounded it to the nearest dollar, because that's the option that they gave us on exam, then it would be 1161. Okay. So now let's look and see how they make it difficult on exam.
Sorry, I had a question on this.
Sure.
It says the closing date is May 17th. So you calculated including the 17th, but then added one more for closing?
Well, the closing takes place on the 17th. So we're subtracting 17 days from 30 days in a month.
Okay,
So we got to add that 17th back in.
back in.
That's-
Okay,
The buyer typically owns the property on the day.
till that day. Okay.
Now remember, in practicality, in practice, it depends who's being charged with that day's expenses.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So for exam, they probably assume that the buyer owns the property on the day of closing, and therefore they're responsible for that day's expenses. Unless they specifically talk about it and say something otherwise in the exam question. Okay. So we just figured out the math. Was the math that difficult? We got the numbers. The math was not difficult, right? So this is how they make it a little more confusing, where people often get it wrong on exam. They figure out the math, they get down the numbers correctly, but then they select the wrong answer because the answers are written like this. You'll have 4 answer options, 2 with the wrong number, 2 with the right number. But it's how it's worded. And when you're reading these things while taking an exam, you're probably reading them in your head quietly, really quick, right? And you're like, credit seller, debit buyer, 1161. Credit buyer, debit seller, 1161. Your mind just got scrambled. Right? I mean, we know the seller gets a credit. So slow down. Take a breath. We figured out the numbers, 1161. So it's going to be one of these answer options. But it's going to be the one where the seller gets a credit. So take a breath and let's see which one does the seller get the credit, and that's the one. Take your time with this. I'm telling you, I know people that got the question, they got the math right. They even knew that the seller gets the credit, but they read it so fast that their minds got scrambled and they selected the wrong answer. Because when you read it quick, try reading it quick. Seller, credit seller, debit buyer, debit seller. It's like, whoa. What the hell? My mind just got scrambled, right? So slow down. You know who gets the credit. Find the one with the right number that gets the credit, and that's the answer. Okay. Do I have any more problems here? Should do. Okay. So here's a question for you. Using a 365-day calendar year, if the property taxes on a property for sale are $9,500 per year, and the seller paid the first quarter taxes, the closing takes place on March 1st. Who gets a credit and for how much? I got to see if I got these. I don't know if I got these slides even done. First quarter tax. Oh, I don't even have these things worked out yet. Okay, so you basically got the gist of it. This is just using the 365-day calendar year. That's you got to use the actual number of days in the month. That's the only difference. It's going to take a little more time just to do this stuff. So you guys got the basic gist of how to answer these, how to calculate the math on this and how to figure it out. So we're pretty much done here. Now it's just a matter of us doing the key terms to review and me also writing, giving you reading to you a little goof email about stuff that we went over in this chapter. Okay. But by the way, you guys may want to write down or snap a picture of this and see if you could figure this problem out. Okay. This is one based on a 365-day calendar year. It's the same question we had previously, but using it based on a 365-day calendar year, which I still have not worked out here. Did I? No, this is a different one. Okay, here, actually use this question instead. Seller paid through second quarter. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, it's a different one altogether. Seller paid through second quarter and closing takes place on May 17th. Okay, I gotta edit this one. Let me edit this. Second quarter taxes, closing takes place on May 17th. Okay, so we'll use the one that we already have worked out there. So using a 365-day calendar year, if the taxes on a property for sale are $9,500 per year, the seller paid the second quarter taxes, the closing takes place on May 17th, who gets a credit and for how much? Well, using this chart, who gets a credit? The seller paid the taxes till here, right?
Seller.
And the closing takes place over here. So it's 1 full month and how many days? Well, how many days are there in May?
31.
January, February, right? I'll take your word for it. So we got 31 days. So 31 minus 17, even though technically we're going to have to add one back in because the buyer owns that day. So 31 minus 17. So the seller prepaid taxes through June 30th, second quarter. Buyer takes ownership on May 17th. They owe the seller for that day plus the remaining 45 days of that prepaid amount. So whatever time is here and there. So the annual property taxes are $9,500. The daily rate, $9,500 divided by 365 gives us $26.03 per day. Seller paid through June 30th, the end of the second quarter. Closing date's May 17th. So that comes up to 45 days. Is that correct? 45 days, or is that wrong? I'm still making these slides, so sorry about that. Let's figure it out. Here's my calculator. $14 plus the 1 day and okay. 30 days in June. January, February, March, April, May, June. Yeah. 30 days in June. So 30 plus 15, that's 45 days. Okay. So 45 days times 2603, that's 11. 1171. So if the seller paid through the second quarter, then the seller gets a credit. So the buyer gets a debit of 1171.35. And the buyer gets and the seller gets the credit. Everybody see how we got that?
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, if you want to snap a picture of the slide, figuring, how we worked it out, show you how we worked it out with the explanation there. That's for a 365-day calendar year. And that's the end of this chapter. So let's do the key terms to review. Money to be paid by one party at closing. What do we call money that's to be paid by one party at closing?
Debt.
A debit. Yep. 10 is A. Sworn statement.
Affidavit.
That's an affidavit. 3 is B. After the end of a period for which a payment is due.
Arrears.
Arrears. 4 is C. Title traced from each owner to the following owner.
Chain of title.
6 is D. An account of what the borrower paid, what the seller paid, and what was paid by others.
CD, closure, closing.
It's all stated on the closing disclosure, correct. 7 is E. Money due and payable to one party at closing.
Money due and payable to.
Credit.
It's a credit. 9 is F. Condensed history of all documents affecting a parcel of real estate.
Abstract of title.
1 is G, correct. A lawyer's statement after studying an abstract.
Attorney's opinion of title.
The attorney's opinion of title. That is correct. 5 is H. Information that one has direct knowledge.
Actual notice.
2 is I, actual notice. Information one could know by investigating. The public records.
Construction notice.
Constructive notice. 8 is J, correct. All right, key terms 2. County's collection of documents relating to real estate.
Public records.
5 is A, public records. Prohibits kickbacks.
Section 8.
Section 8, 7 is B. Tax due the state of New Jersey at closing.
Transfer fee.
I'm sorry?
Is it the transfer fee?
8 is C, the realty transfer fee. Title company's guarantee of clear title. What's the title company's guarantee that you have clear title?
Evidence of title.
The they'll issue you a title insurance policy after they do their title search. And once they're sure you got good, clear title, they'll issue you a title insurance policy. So 10 is D, the title insurance policy. Corrective distribution of future expenses. We just did math problems trying to figure that out.
Proration.
Prorations, 4 is E. Closing handled by a neutral third party.
Escrow closing.
1 is F, the escrow closing. A court action to remove the cloud on the title, or to remove a cloud on the title.
Suit to quiet title.
A suit to quiet title, 9 is G. Abstract, lawyer's opinion, or title insurance. These are all examples of
Evidence of title.
evidence of title. 2 is H. Good or clear title, reasonably free from defects. What do we call that?
Marketable title.
Marketable or merchantable title is correct. 3 is I. Federal law ensuring that buyer and seller receive a detailed accounting of the funds at closing.
Trid.
TRID. 6 is J. There you go. And that pretty much concludes chapter 21. Hold on 1 second here. And we're going to end up with a little goof email. At least I hope it's a goof email. So let me read this off to you. This covers some of the things that we finally went over, a bunch of these items in our class. I think it's a goof email. I should hope it is. But let's read about it. Now we have an understanding. It says, you got to love this lawyer. Everyone who was ever bought a house, anyone who has ever bought a house will enjoy this. A New Orleans lawyer sought an FHA loan for a client who lost their house during Hurricane Katrina and they wanted to rebuild. He was told the loan would be granted if he could prove satisfactory title to the parcel of property being offered as collateral. The title to the property dated back to 1803, which took the lawyer 3 months to track down. After sending the information to the FHA, he received the following reply. Upon review of your letter adjoining your client's loan application, we note that the request is supported by an abstract of title. And while we compliment the able manner in which you have prepared and presented the application, we must point out that you've only cleared the title to the proposed collateral property back to 1803. Before final approval can be accorded, it will be necessary to clear title back to its origin. Annoyed, the lawyer responded as follows. I note that you wish to have title extended further than 194 years covered in the present application. I was unaware that any educated person in this country, particularly those working in the property area, would not know that Louisiana was purchased by the U.S. from France in 1803, the year of origin identified in our application. So for the edification of the uninformed FHA bureaucrat, the title to the land prior to U.S. ownership was obtained from France, which had acquired it by the right of conquest from Spain. The land came into possession of Spain by the right of discovery made in the year 1492 by a sea captain named Christopher Columbus, who had been granted the privilege of seeking a new route to India by the Spanish monarch Isabella. The good Queen Isabella, being a pious woman, that means very religious, and almost as careful about titles as the FHA, took the precaution of securing the blessing of the Pope before she sold her jewels to finance Columbus's expedition. Now, the Pope, as I'm sure you may be aware, is the emissary of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and it's commonly accepted that he created this part of the world. Therefore, I believe it's safe to assume that God also made the part of the world called Louisiana. God, therefore, would be the owner of origin, and his origin dates back to the beginning of time, the world as we know it, and the FHA. I hope you find God's original claim to be satisfactory. Now may we have our damn loan. And then it says he got the loan. I had a little bit of a religious undertone to it, but I thought it was cute because it was talking about the property and the type of idiocy you could expect from governmental employees, right? But I thought it was a cute little story, so I like to share that one with people after we finish this chapter and we've gone over these items. So now we have an understanding of what the hell they're talking about here. So it may make it a little bit more humorous. Anyway, we're done, guys. Congratulations. We've made it. You've made it. Now all you got to do is pass the school exam. Okay, so you go fill out that school exam registration form on our website. Once you do, you may want to shoot me a little email, let me know that you did, along with your email address. And this way, if I'm even not at home, I could remotely enter you through my cell phone into the exam system. And then whenever you're ready to take it, go right ahead. You get 2 free attempts that are included with it. If you should need more, 2 more attempts are $20. But hopefully you get it on the first shot. So study up and take your school exam. You will not get your completion certificate until you take and pass the school exam, because schools are required not only just to give you the course material, but to make sure that you have a basic knowledge of the information. So the state requires us to give you a school exam first that you must pass before we could enter you into the state system for you to take the state exam. And before we could give you that completion certificate, you have to show that you've absorbed the material. You weren't just learning by osmosis, so you were paying attention and doing your study and all that stuff. So
I have a
you did
question.
that. Yeah, shoot. What's your question?
Sorry, I'm hiding myself from the camera because my hair is not done.
Junk. Okay.
Question, do we get our score at the same time once we're done with the exam?
Yeah, once you're done with taking the exam, you finish the exam, it'll immediately give you the score.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
For this,
And you don't need to schedule the exam once I enter you in the system. So you fill out that form, I have to still manually enter you into the system. Once I manually enter you in the system and you're in, you could take the exam. You don't need to schedule the day or the time you want to take it. You could take it at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't care. It doesn't matter. All right. You could take the school exam right through our website. You basically go to the website and here, let me try to pull up our website and I'll show you what you got to do.
for the certificate, do we pick it up or is it by email?
Nope, I'm going to email it to you. I create a PDF document so that you could share it and reprint it as many times as you need. Okay, so here we go. So you go to our school website. By the way, we have a video all over. This is the one, how to sign up for real estate classes. But on most other pages, like the one where you're salesperson, school exam registration, you click there. You see, I got this video with me with my mouth open. That's such an awful picture. But it's on all the other sub pages here too. Starting the salesperson exam. Exam tips. Nope, it's not on that page, but it's on a bunch of these pages here. Here we go. It's on the actual school exam page and before and after the exam FAQ page. This video is like 45 minutes long. It explains everything what you got to do from registering for the school exam to taking the school exam to getting fingerprinted to taking the state exam to what to do after you pass the state exam and get fingerprinted, affiliating with a broker, all kinds of information like that I share with you in this. Okay, or you could just go to this before and after exam FAQ page, and you could maybe just scroll down to try to find the question to that's on your mind and getting the answer right here. I got links and resources for stuff. From taking the school exam to registering for the fingerprinting. Here I've got a link directly with the fingerprinting code directly in it. You could click on that. Or if you want to know what IDs you need to bring with you, you can click on that. This is the fingerprinting form you need to print and take with you to the fingerprinting center. I have a direct link to that here. For registering for the state exam, I have a screenshot here showing you which one to click on. Make sure you click on the right one. It's called the New Jersey Real Estate Salesperson Combo. It's available in English or Spanish and on-site or remotely through online proctored exam, meaning you have to have your camera and audio on at all times. And they may have you scan the room around you to make sure you don't have any cell phone or mobile devices or notes or things of that nature. Okay. And just loads and loads of other questions here.
And have your calculator though. Can you show your calculator if you decide?
Yes, it has to be a regular plain calculator, no scientific calculators or real estate calculators. Okay, just like a plain one like this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, and then look, I got an exam tips page here under the salesperson school exam where I give you a bunch of tips to taking the exam. And if you want some practice resources, you know, those practice resources that I early emailed to you, I have them available here as well. Okay. So you could go to our website, careerpathacademy.com, click on the drop down for salesperson school exam registration. Okay. If you just go to you click on salesperson's school exam registration, you got to fill out this form. And then shoot me an email, okay? For those exam tips, right underneath that, you click on exam tips, okay? And that's it.
And one more thing, within how many days should I take school exam?
Whenever you're ready. But how long do you have to take it? You have You have 6 months to pass the school exam from your start date. So 6 months from your start date. So what did we do? We went over a little bit here in this class, so it was like 2.5 weeks. So we, you still got 5.5 months here, pretty much, to take and pass the school exam. All right, that's plenty of time for you to take and to study and take and pass the school exam. If you should go over that and you should need more time, you're going to have to pay $100 for an additional 6-month extension. Don't do that. You don't need to do that. You could just, you got plenty of time, you know, but don't wait till the last minute. We get people all the time. They wait for the last minute and then they get charged that extra $100. And sometimes they wait too long and you can't. After a year, that's it. There's no more extension. You'd have to pay and retake the whole class over again. Don't be that person. Okay. We get them all the time. We get people all the time for this reason or that reason. This happened in my life, you know, fill in the excuse here, you know, but don't have excuses. Go get it. Get it. Get her done. All right. Any other questions for me?
No, you were very informative, so I appreciate that. You gave
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I tried to be as informative as possible and give you all kinds of tips that are not normally included in this class. That's why we ran over a little bit. You know, I try to give additional information and resources and guides and things that could be helpful that your brokers should be teaching you, but they don't always. So I just want to make sure my students do well and give them that extra resources. And remember, you have access to these recordings. I will upload these videos so you can rewatch any portion you need. If you need something explained again, you don't need to reschedule it and sit in a classroom again. Although you're welcome to. You could sit and take this class as many times as you want. But make sure that, you know, you study up, you get the information refreshed, you get it in your head, take the exam, don't wait too long, get it while it's fresh in your head. Just cram for the exam now, study all your notes, and take it, see what happens. Look, we had the one girl, she had all the hours in, but she didn't finish all the content yet, and she just took it and she passed the school exam. Although I told her, you know, at least watch these videos because she couldn't because of work and all. I told her at least watch these videos to get the additional information so that you can pass the state exam. You'll need the information from the chapters that you missed, which was like 19 and 21. So good luck, everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to call me, reach out to me. If I'm not teaching, I pick up the phone. If I am teaching, leave a message and I'll get back to you. So right now I got a bunch of messages to get back to. So I'll be processing students that pass school exams this week, and I'll be answering phone calls. So if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Even if you're already working with another broker, you know, you're in the field, you want to chat and just say hi, let me know how you're doing. I like to hear from my students all the time. Absolutely. You know, I'm there for you guys. Okay. The support doesn't end at the end of this class here. You know, be glad to help you with any issues you ever got. And if you're shopping around for brokers and you don't have one in mind yet, and you're interviewing with brokers, remember we have that interview sheet in the shared Google Drive with interview questions that you could ask brokers when shopping around for a broker to hang your license with. If you want me to ever look at some of their like commission fee schedules and stuff like that and review it with you, to you know, feel free to do that too. I could always open up a Zoom meeting with us and we could look over the materials, or you could email them to me and we could talk over the phone, and while I look it over, and I could tell you if you should ask a few more questions to clarify something, or if something seems like it's a little bit too good to be true or not, you know. But good luck, everybody. Hope you pass your school exam on the first try and your state exam. You could arrange for that fingerprinting. You don't have to do it in a certain order either. Okay.
Thank you so much. Very informative. Happy I took your class.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Do you take you have Google reviews?
Yeah. Well, okay. When you, yeah, I do have Google reviews and such like that. Let me see. I could send you the information here. Put it up here now, actually. I usually tell people just wait till you pass the exam before you give me any reviews. You know, see how you do before you start giving me reviews. But let's take a look. I could pull one up right now. I got it when I send you the email with the completion certificate. I usually have a place with the links and resources for that stuff. Do I? Yes, I do. Okay.
I have a question. I'm filling out the form for the class ID student enrolled in. What would that be for this class?
Okay, your start date. So first of all, you took the day class. So it's SPD for salesperson day.
Mhm.
So by the way, there's in the messenger, I'm sorry, in the messenger, I just put up the thing for the links for the reviews. I'll usually email them to you after you pass the school exam as well. So those are the places where you can leave reviews for us. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Or the class ID student.
Okay. So you took the salesperson day class, so it's SPD, and then the start date, 10. That's for October. What was the start date? The 7th, was it? 10/07/2025, I believe it was. Let me take a look.
I don't even know, to be honest.
Let's take a look. Yeah, it was. Oh no, it was the 6th, 10/06/2025. At least that's what I got listed here in the playlist.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. And I got all those other videos uploaded. I'll upload these next ones after I end it. Oh, I can end this one right now, actually. Let me stop the recording.